Okay, welcome everyone to our City Council virtual work session. Um, this is our first virtual work session, and we're about to hear from Dr. Caesar. The first item on our agenda is the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Commission. This will be an update. Just a reminder to everybody, there's no voting today, but if you would like to speak, just raise your hand and I will call on you, and we'll go from there. Okay, Dr. Caesar.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. I am excited to bring you this update about the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board. Waiting for my slide to change. There is a bit of a delay.
We're having trouble hearing.
Okay. How's this? Is that better?
Much better, yes.
Much better. Wonderful. Okay, so looks like we are moving now. So we've been working on the creation of this board since January to give an opportunity to voices that have previously not been heard in our process. So on March 3rd, we presented a process and timeline for application submission and review. And Council gave the feedback that we wanted to review everyone, including those without leadership experience. So we made sure to create an inclusive process. We posted the applications on the city website in English and in Spanish. The official application posting period was from March 15th through April 15th of 2020. However, I will say we had such a great interest in this that our applications were received prior to the 15th, which was prior to our official launch. So in total, we had 57 applicants, wow. 44 English applications, and 13 Spanish applications. So the two tracks we had was a community track and a professional track. The community track is for individuals who live and identify with the Hispanic and or immigrant community. So within that track, we had 38 applications. For the professional track, which is an individual who works for an organization and who provides direct service to the Hispanic and immigrant community, applications. For the application review, we compiled a team from Human Relations and also Community Engagement staff, and we assessed the availability to participate, the record and type of service to the Hispanic and immigrant community. And then we looked for those with a strong interest in Hispanic immigrant issues, and then any unique skill sets that were presented. In terms of evaluation, we used the council-approved criteria, and applicants were scored with a maximum of 15 points possible. And they're put into three groups here. The first group is for those who scored 13 points up to 15, and we had 16 individuals in that category. The second category is for those who scored 6 to 12 points. We had 37, which is the bulk of the application. And then the last category is for those who scored 0 to 6. And typically, if you scored 0 to 6, you didn't complete the application fully. So the next steps in this process is that applications and supportive material will be coming to you at the conclusion of this council meeting. In that packet, you're going to receive a number of documents, a memo outlining scoring. You will also receive the actual PDF applications, and you will also receive an Excel document. Now, I'll say up front that the Excel document may be a little tricky to read, so I recommend starting with the PDF document. It should be a little bit easier.
Who has any questions they'd like to ask Dr. Caesar? All right, I have one question, Dr. Caesar. When we get this package, I guess the rankings from the 13 to 15, we'll see all that. You didn't make any your team did not make any specific recommendations then? You just ranked people. Is that correct?
That is correct. We just based this on scoring. So the first set of 16, you'll see the scores next to the names. So you'll know when you see the packet who scored what, and then you'll have an opportunity to review everything that was submitted.
Okay. We're going to then need to figure out how we're going to make these selections. So what is your recommendation on that?
In terms on how you all should go about making the selections?
Yeah, I thought that y'all were making the recommendations, so I'm caught a little off guard here.
Well, I can recommend a rubric, and the rubric will actually give you some criteria to look at. And I think that was a very easy way to go through scoring. But I'll tell you, we looked at criteria, and I think the great place to start is with the list that we're going to send you. So you'll see the top 16 applicants according to score based upon the criteria that you all have outlined.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions from anyone else? Okay, Dr. Caesar, you're still up. The next item is the Police Advisory Board update.
Okay, so I'm going to start with some background. This has been a topic of interest in the community for a long time, so I want to make sure that we go through some of that background information to set the stage for it. Back on May 29th of last year, I presented 3 options to Council in terms of a police oversight board, a police review board, and the Office of Citizen Advocacy as options. Council requested that we add a 4th option of maybe having a hybrid model with the Office of Citizen Advocacy and a 3 to 5 person board. Council also requested that we conduct a community engagement process. We did that in November, where we conducted 6 sessions in each district. The themes from the sessions dealt around transparency, accountability, trust, communication, mutual respect, equity, and safety. So in creating this board and looking at the functions, we wanted to make sure that we emphasized these common themes. So on March 3rd, Council approved the creation of the board consisting of 7 seats, a civil rights attorney, a mental health provider, a member of the LGBTQ community, 3 community advocates, and a police chief appointee. The functions of this board are to serve as a policy and procedural review board. This board will review existing policies, contribute to equitable policy development, and engage the community through educational outreach on RPD policies and procedures. This board will not conduct investigations, hear testimony, weigh in on and recommend disciplinary action, take or respond to resident complaints. However, we will use the complaint data and appeals information that already comes into the department to prioritize policies for review. So the application process was opened March 12th and closed April 30th. We had 10 applicants. We didn't get any civil rights attorneys. We got 1 mental health provider, 1 LGBTQ member, 5 folks requesting to be the police chief appointee, and 3 victim advocates. And some considerations around the low response rate. This happened, we posted this around the same time that things started to shut down related to COVID-19. So we believe that COVID-19 may have shifted the focus of residents who may have applied. The concerns move from police accountability to basic things like employment, safety, health. So, I think that's something to consider in terms of if we want to repost it or if we want to continue with what we have. Next steps are similar to the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board. We're going to send you the supporting documentation. Now, for this group, we actually requested resumes because there were specific positions involved. So you'll get the same type of packet. It will have the applications and the resumes of the folks who've applied. And I also want to mention that after the deadline closed, we still received, I think, an additional application. So if council could advise on if you want us to send that along with the packet as well, you can do that. And any questions?
All right, we'll start with Councilor Branch and then Councilor Melton.
I'm really concerned about the low turnout of applicants. I think because of us opening this up at the same time as COVID-19, that I would recommend not sending us the list of applicants right now. Hold on to that, and we extend the period for a little while longer. Just based on those numbers, if we just select who we have, we will not have a civil rights attorney, and everyone else will be on except for the police chief appointee. That'll just be one person that will be appointed, but everyone else will be on it just because they submitted an application. And I think there could be some good applicants out there, not knowing who submitted, that probably didn't submit because of COVID-19. So my recommendation is that we delay the appointments for this board at this time.
Councilor Melton.
Yeah, I echo Councilmember Branch's concerns. I actually was contacted by a civil rights attorney who was interested in serving. He sent me his resume because he noticed that the online application period has closed. I think we forwarded along, but we're told that the period to receive applications is closed. So that's at least one person who fills one of the spots. I'm not saying that's who we should appoint, but who's interested. And I'm wondering if maybe we left it open a little longer, we could get some more applications. So I support that idea. I also have a question about whether we are collecting like racial demographics in our applications. I think it's extremely important that this board has people of color, and not just people of color, it has to have African American appointees. We have to have that voice on this board. So I want to make sure that we have received enough qualified applicants from that community, especially. And I want to make sure that that seat is, that those people, that group is on the board in multiple ways.
Also, our Hispanic community.
Yes, I think we need diversity on the board, and but specifically, we have to have African Americans on the board.
Dr. Caesar, can you answer that question, please?
Yes, in terms of diversity, we do collect the demographics in both sets of applications. So you would be able to see who's applying if you wanted to maybe designate a certain number of slots for African Americans or other groups. Same thing with the Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs Board.
Okay, Councilor Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the comments from Mr. Branch and Mr. Melton. And I note, since Mr. Melton and I are both alumni of a law school that was focused on civil rights, has a deep civil rights history, I think we could get together and get some more applications in. So are we then today talking about extending the application period?
Dr. Caesar?
Or reopening, I guess, reopening the application period?
Dr.
That
Caesar?
is a possibility if council votes with it.
Did Councilor Knight want to say something? I didn't know if you raised your hand or not.
We can't hear you.
Okay, we're going to jump to Councilor Melton.
I just want to add, I do feel a strong sense of urgency to get this board moving, especially given some of the recent demonstrations we've seen in our city and some of the concerns, rightfully so, that those demonstrations have stirred up. I think this board could be incredibly helpful, which is why I asked for an update on it at the last council meeting. But I want to make sure that it has the right people on it. And so I think there's going to be a balance between extending perhaps the application deadline period and also moving quickly to get it going. So if we extend it, I think maybe we need to be very deliberate and mindful about maybe reaching out to folks who we think can fill needs to get applications, and then have it close again in a relative short period of time.
Councilor Knight?
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate what everybody else said. I think we do need to extend it to get to fill out the slots, first of all. And also, I don't know how active the staff has been sort of reaching out and, recruiting, not individuals, but within groups of folks that may be interested. So I think maybe we can be more active in doing that. And I agree with Councilor Melton. We need to do it quickly, but I do think we need to open it back up for another, I don't know what it would be, a month. I mean, we obviously are dealing with this crisis at the same time, which is going to be hard to get people to pay attention to it. But maybe if we act more actively, try to recruit, we could get this thing, get the it filled within the next month or so.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we extend the application process through May 30th? And then bring this back to the June 2nd meeting for an update and consideration.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
with a holiday being in there, I'm tempted to say maybe we extend it to maybe June 5th and bring it to our meeting, our second meeting in June. That will give us two meetings, our June meeting and our July meeting, to vote and make decisions. And I'm just thinking that because I know everyone stay at home and everything, but we're already 2 weeks out with a holiday in between.
Well, if it was a normal holiday, I would say, sure. I totally get that, but it's not a normal holiday. And one of the reasons why I would like to see us move quicker is that I have met with the community. There's a high demand for us to move forward. So that's why I said, let's wait, extend it, get an update on June 2nd. We might be pleasantly surprised.
Okay.
But what I would also ask is for our communications team to really help promote this. And also all of you, I mean, on your social media accounts, whatnot, try and get the word out. I think it'd be a great idea if Jonathan and Patrick could do some outreach to potential civil rights attorneys. And I'm going to ask the group this just as point of discussion. We specifically said a civil rights attorney. If we had an attorney on there with a civil rights background, would that fit the bill?
I think it will. I think we just got to look at their credentials and see how much involvement they've had.
Okay.
But so I'm fine. So we'll say until May 29th, which is a Thursday, which is a Friday, 5 p.m.
Okay. And then could we tweak the criteria on the attorney and see if we get some additional candidates? Dr. Caesar?
A council decision. You all can definitely tweak it and tell me what the criteria is, and we will put that out there with the application.
Okay, so the criteria would be an attorney with civil rights background. In other words, somebody who's participated, and Jonathan, you or Patrick might be able to better define this, but maybe it's not a practicing civil rights attorney, but an attorney who has some experience in civil rights issues or an interest. Jonathan? Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Captain Milton.
That's fine. I'm also having some tech issues here. Everyone's videos are. Can everyone see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good way. I think it should be an attorney that has some experience in civil rights issues, but I don't know that that has to be the forefront of their practice or that that's what they're substantially involved in. So I think that the board can weigh what is relevant experience, but a law degree and some exposure experience or work in the civil rights field.
Okay, is everybody good with that? Can we have a show of thumbs if we're all good? Councilor Martin? Okay. All right, that's the direction we would like to head, Dr. Caesar. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our third item, now we're getting on to the budget area. Our third item is the Raleigh Water Enterprise, and we have Robert Massengill here to...
Madam Mayor, City Manager has his hand up.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to introduce the topics for the rest of the agenda, if you don't mind. If that's okay.
Not at all.
Great. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present the remainder of the items, our budget updates. We usually, for the benefit of citizens who might be watching this from home, we usually do budget work sessions throughout the spring from February, March, and April in order to prepare for the manager's recommended budget. Obviously, this year with the COVID-19 situation, we were unable to do that. But the city's budget is quite large and complicated with a lot of different categories. So what we thought we would do today is have our enterprise funds, or funds that are supported with independent revenue sources, to give you a brief update on what we are planning to recommend officially next Tuesday. So kind of the way to look at it this way: unlike your previous budget work sessions where we were foreshadowing what we were thinking we're going to do, this is actually giving you the recommendation a week in advance, so that when we present formally next Tuesday, it sort of shrinks down the amount of content, mostly focused on the general capital and the general fund operating budget, so that you don't have to also deal with all the enterprise funds. So now, unlike other work sessions, this is what we're planning to recommend. So in the past, you may have given us some feedback. We make some adjustments. We're going into production now. And so this is more foreshadowing the formal recommendation for next Tuesday. And for the remainder of the agenda, Mayor, you can just go through and call on the folks. I don't need to introduce each topic, but these are our representatives from our various enterprise funds to give you that update. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
Okay, Michelle, if you can get my presentation up. All right, Mayor and City Council, thank you for allowing me to present our FY21 budget. In a moment, this will be our agenda for today, which looks much different than what we had planned before we ever heard about COVID-19. Still waiting for that. We'll talk about the impacts of the virus on the utility. We'll go over some of our main cost drivers in both the operating and CIP budgets. We'll go over the utility rate model and provide a rate recommendation at the end. Raleigh Water is a 100% enterprise fund with completely different revenue sources than the general fund, so the virus is not having the same financial impact on us. You may recall during the April 7th City Council meeting, we raised the threshold between Tier 2 and Tier 3 of the water rates in response to our perceived shift in usage patterns. Based on April billing data, our water system usage has slightly increased over the last 8 weeks compared to last year. Usage has clearly shifted from the non-residential customer class to the residential customer class. While non-residential revenue was down 9% in April, residential revenue increased by 17% with a 48% increase in Tier 2, which validates our assumption when we changed the tier threshold last month. This will actually result in higher billed revenue than usual. However, we've seen the delinquency rate increase from 0.6% of accounts to around 5.5% of our accounts since we stopped disconnecting service for non-payment. The current total delinquent amount is about $5.8 million, which is about $2 million more than normal. We expect to be able to recover the delinquent amounts by developing manageable payment plans to help our customers dig out of debt. We're also seeking state and federal funding assistance to help customers who are financially impacted by the virus. We anticipate losing between $900,000 and $1 million in late fee revenue, depending on how long we continue to waive late fees, and that's revenue that we will not be able to recover. So far, we've not seen a big impact in the FY20 development fee revenue, but we do expect it to go down next year. Based on how development responded during the recession, we should expect about a 25% reduction in development fee revenue, which is between $4 and $5 million for our department. We are doing some things to offset some of the negative financial impacts, like cutting back on travel and training, implementing a hiring freeze for all but essential positions, making only essential purchases, and prioritizing which capital projects need to proceed and which ones can wait. Regardless, your utility is financially strong, and we will be fine, which was recently confirmed by Moody's in a recent report that was included in the manager's update just this past Friday. Okay, I'm going to switch over to our operational budget now, and our slide's catching up with us. Our proposed FY21 budget is $249 million, which is within 0.3% of last year's budget. The primary cost drivers in our budget are personnel in the form of salaries and retirement expenses, electrical costs to operate the treatment plants, chemical costs at our treatment plants and the collection system, biosolids hauling costs, which will go way down after the bioenergy recovery project is operational, and credit card fees. Our expenses are basically broken down into 3 buckets. Operating expenses, things like salaries, chemicals, electrical costs, are represented on this chart by the blue bars across the bottom. Debt service, which is our annual principal and interest payments on our utility debt, were represented by the green bars in the middle. And pay-go for capital projects, represented by gray bars across the top. This chart shows how those 3 cost buckets have changed over time. We've worked hard over the last 11 years to manage our operating expenses, doing things like mapping our business processes, applying lean principles, leveraging technology, and implementing management systems. The big change over time has been for pay-go funding for capital projects, primarily for our asset management program, which is still a need. Pay-go has increased most significantly since 2014, when we implemented infrastructure replacement charges on the utility bill and incrementally increased them until FY18. Maintaining the financial metrics to obtain and retain AAA bond rating has also helped generate pay-go funding. Okay, moving on to our FY21 Capital Improvements Program, or CIP. The main cost drivers for next year are addressing wet weather flows and structural conditions of our large diameter sewer interceptors like the West Neuse interceptor, the asset management program, where we continue to focus on condition assessment, small and large diameter pipe replacements, and implementing asset management for our vertical assets like our treatment plants and our pump stations, and improvements at the E.M. Johnson Water Treatment Plant to rehab and upgrade the 53-year-old plant. Our 10-year CIP is $1.76 billion. In a moment, our chart will pop up to show. There it is. This chart shows the breakdown of our CIP in the major categories. Our asset management needs make up about 1/4 of the CIP, spread fairly evenly over the 10 years. The E.M. Johnson improvements mostly in Phase 1, addressing the capacity and condition of our large diameter sewer interceptors is an immediate need, with the majority of the funding in Phase 1 to address known issues. Wastewater pump station costs for rehab and replacement of existing pump stations and to address growth in the eastern portions of the service area represent about 14% of the CIP. most of which is in Phase 2 or the second 5 years. And wastewater treatment improvements at the Smith Creek Resource Recovery Facility in Wake Forest, and improvements at the Neuse River facility with the Bioenergy Recovery Project, most of which is in Phase 1. We use a rate model to forecast revenues and expenditures each year. A copy of the rate model was included in your package that you have. There are several assumptions in the rate model. Some of them are shown on the next slide. There is a difference between the rate model and the budget. Predicting actual expenditures is important in the rate model, so we align the utility rates with the actual cost to operate the utility. For example, the salary budget is discounted in the rate model to account for vacancies, which usually run about 8%. We assume 1.5% growth in the number of accounts, which is consistent with what we've experienced over the last several years. From FY21 on, we're assuming 1% increase in annual consumption for residential customers, 0.5% increase for non-residential customers, and no growth in irrigation usage. The model also assumes just under 3% rate increases to the average customers in the out years, or from FY22 on, and meets our financial and debt policy goals through FY24. Those financial goals include maintaining a parity debt coverage ratio greater than 2 times and a year-end fund balance greater than or equal to 100% of our operating expenses. Meeting these financial goals has allowed us to achieve and maintain AAA credit ratings from all 3 agencies, which gives us access to the lowest interest rates. As a matter of fact, it's allowed us to refinance a portion of our debt last year, which resulted in annual savings of about $1 million in interest alone. City Council has supported rate increases over the last 17 years, which has made us financially strong enough to weather the COVID-19 storm. Mayor, I'm sure you recall some difficult decisions that Council made during the 07-08 drought and during the 2010 recession. The purpose of maintaining 100% fund balance.
Sorry, Robert, I had to say, oh, yes, I do.
I'm sure. The purpose of maintaining 100% fund balance is to provide funding during catastrophic events and times of uncertainty, like now. Things like cash funding about 50% of our capital projects also provides flexibility to slow some projects to free up some fund to support operational needs if necessary. I'm pleased to let you know that for the first time in 17 years, we can meet our financial goals and adequately fund the capital improvements program with no rate increase this year. Still waiting. There we go. This chart shows some important information from the rate model that you have. The numbers down the left-hand column of the chart indicate the line on the model that you have in front of you. The top 2 rows on this chart show the monthly bill amounts for an average customer and the future proposed rate increases. Please note that less than 3% increases are forecast for the out years from FY22 on. The bottom 2 rows show the results of our financial goals, our debt service ratio, and fund balance, both of which are achieved through FY24. Each year we update the actuals and reevaluate the assumptions in the model to determine what increase, if any, is needed. And while we could always utilize additional funding, I believe this is a good year to give our customers a break and hold off on water and sewer increases. This is the same recommendation that we had planned before we ever heard of COVID-19, and it is still valid. As a reminder, a gallon of tap water for our average residential customer costs 0.6 cents. It's only 1.5 pennies for water and sewer service for our average customer. So how do we compare with our peers based on their current rates that they have now? We actually moved 2 positions to the left on the chart that's about to come up once we loaded the current rates from the other systems. And we know that many of our peers had planned to implement pretty significant rate increases this year, but most of them are actually not proceeding because of the virus and its financial impact on the customers. Michelle, I think I tried to advance that slide. There you go. Thank you. So you can see we did actually move over a couple of spots, but we're still pretty uniform with our peers. And Mayor and Council, that's really all I have today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. There's no proposed rate increase, so there's no recommendation this year.
Great work, Robert. Thank you very much. Councillor Buffkin has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Massengill. First, a word of congratulations on that Moody's rating. That's a big deal. I know that a lot of work goes into applying and maintaining that rating, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job.
A couple questions for you. First, on the customer side, can you tell us a little bit more about payment plans and how folks go about applying and how those are structured? We know folks that have been hurting and not able to pay their bills eventually are going to be in a position to start applying. So can you give us a little more detail about payment plans?
Sure, I can. When we see customers go delinquent now and they would otherwise be subject to disconnection, our call center is reaching out to those customers and asking them if they would like to set up payment plans. And many of them are. We're not waiting until it's time to go back to being able to turn customers off to start developing payment plans. The Executive Order 124 requires us to at least extend payment plans out at least 6 months, which we certainly plan to do. But I also plan to be more lenient if necessary to try to make payment plans affordable for customers. We think about some of our service workers and other folks who have been unemployed for a while, and it's going to take them a while to dig out. And so we want to try to make it affordable.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And if I may, Mayor, just one more question.
Yes.
On the financing side, boy, are we all glad we had all that cash available to help us through this situation. And you deserve another congratulations on your prudent management of the utility for that. Looking out to the future, it looks like we're going to be paying for more things with cash in the future. I think I understood that correctly. Certainly straighten me out if I had that wrong. And then I guess I wish you could help me with a little context of money is so cheap right now. We've got a great credit rating. So why wouldn't we be using more debt financing during this situation?
Right now, we have about a 50-50 funding of our capital program, 50% cash, 50% borrowed money. We oftentimes like to borrow money to build capital projects for growth-related projects. For example, a treatment plant that will build in capacity for future users to come online. And so what we'd like to do is borrow that money so we spread those payments out over time so those future users help us pay those back. We've typically been using our cash to pay for pipe replacements, like replacing the plumbing in your house or replacing the roof on your house, sort of doing repairs as opposed to the large expansion type, adding on to your house, maybe an example. But we take a look at both of those and we move those projects forward. You're right. The reason we were able to save $1 million last year is because our credit rating and the interest rates are prime. We work with finance regularly, and if they see that things are prime for us to refund additional debt, we'll certainly do that. We will go to a commercial draw program and finance through commercial paper for 2 years, and then we'll go back to the bond market typically. So we will continue to use a balance of borrowed money and cash money. So we should be taking advantage of some of this interest. I'm looking down at the monitor to see your face, but I know your face is really up here.
Thank you. I appreciate those answers, and I apologize for the background noise.
Was that your cat?
I was going to say I have a cat too, but I was muted, so that can't be me.
Yes, he's recently been put on a diet, and he's not real happy about it. So sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The other night, Patrick's cat was meowing so hard that he jumped. I didn't know what it was. And he was like, yeah, my cat's really angry. She starts meowing about an hour before dinner time. So, yes, it was pretty funny. So we all get to experience each other's lives on virtual meetings. So, oh, and how much weight does your cat need to lose, Patrick?
He's embarrassed about the whole thing. I better not say.
Okay. A little levity there, folks. That was actually good. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question, Robert? Okay, Robert, thank you so much. Great job. You're getting lots of thumbs up here. Really pleased with the work you've done and everything you've done to manage our utility. It is much appreciated. This takes a lot of foresight and vision and on everybody's part. So thank you for making this happen.
Thank you, Mary. It certainly wouldn't happen without all of your support. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Solid Waste Services Enterprise, and Stan Joseph will be coming up. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you. It's good to be here. We'll get my presentation up. It's hard to follow Robert and all his thumbs up. I don't feel like I'm going to get those thumbs up as much. So thanks, Robert. Madam Mayor and Council, it's really nice to see you all again. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Stan Joseph. I'm the Solid Waste Services Director. Let's figure this out here. So today I'm going to talk about a couple different topics. I hope I did that right. It's slow. There we go. Okay. I'm going to give you a quick department overview, and I'm going to talk about the recycling market changes, the impact on the city of Raleigh. I'm also going to discuss our yard waste center operations and close it with our FY21 proposed budget. What you're seeing on this slide is simply the different services that we provide to the citizens of Raleigh. Our solid waste fee is $14.45, and our recycling fee is $2.60 for a total of $17.05. You know, the only thing I'd like to point out here is we offer a premium level of service in the city of Raleigh. And when you look at just basic garbage and recycling services throughout North Carolina, you see a significantly higher fee. I feel compelled to mention our team. I want to thank you for the continued support and appreciation you've shown for our employees and the work that they do. I know things haven't been easy lately, especially as we suspended some of the yard waste services in order to focus on our essential services. But our employees serve our citizens every day in very austere conditions. Their courage and commitment they've been showing during this crisis makes me honored to be part of the team. They always do the best that they can. I felt compelled to mention that. So I think we're going to talk about recycling and yard waste. I know this is going to feel a little bit like Groundhog Day because I've talked about these two topics here, golly, for the past 2 years probably. But I think we're actually making some headway. So I'm excited to tell you about a couple of things that we've got on the horizon. I'd like to start with the global recycling market. I'm going to wait for the slide to catch up here. You know, I guess what I have to say about this, and I think we talked a little bit about this last year, is that So it's basically a supply and demand issue. You know, the global markets overseas have affected the value of recyclable materials. We in the United States have had an over-reliance on exporting, and as a result, it impacted us significantly. At the end of the day, you have less value for the materials, the recyclable materials at our curb, and operations have costs to process those recyclables have increased, and between supply and demand and the pushback from overseas on our material, it's created this global crisis. I always like to take just a minute and talk a little bit about weighted average price. For folks in the recycling industry, it's kind of like the NASDAQ in our stock market. It really just kind of describes, as we take our materials off the curb and we collect a ton of that material, we process it, we separate it, we ship it, and we sell it. It tells us, the weighted average price tells us what we can sell it for per ton. This next slide is depressing, but I have to show it. This is 10 years of the weighted average price. And I think you can see exactly what the overseas initiatives and markets has done to the weighted average price in the past 10 years. It's kind of hard to see, but starting there in 2010, we were looking at selling a ton of recyclables for $140 per ton. And I think now we're selling it for about $32 per ton. The orange line, I'm not sure what color that is, I'm colorblind, but that straight line across right there is the cost of operations. That's what it takes a processor like Sunoco or Waste Management to process 1 ton of recyclables. And that's at $70 per ton. So when you're selling it for 32 and you're processing it at a cost of 70, that's a very difficult situation to be in. So where are we now? Well, I think we're probably at where we expected to be when we discussed the evolution of the market last year. I think Sunoco sustained as much losses as they could. And they are now at the point where they came to us to restructure our agreement with them. In the summer, they came to us and broached the subject of restructuring the agreement. In the fall of 2019, we signed a short-term 6-month agreement that expired in June 30th for a total expense projected at $1.5 million, so we can have some time to negotiate a longer-term contract. Currently, we have met with Sunoco. We've negotiated that contract, and it is sitting in a holding pattern waiting to be approved. What it's going to cost us is about $3 million annually to process recyclables in the city of Raleigh. I will say that a contract of this type, although it is a big shift in the contract that is currently in existence, it's in line with what other municipalities are doing in North Carolina. We've researched that tremendously, and this is just the new norm. This is what recycling looks like for the immediate future. I will say that we are also exploring regional approaches to recycling, as many of the municipalities that we all meet together recognize this as the new normal. Next, I'd like to talk about our yard waste center legacy pile. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is something we've also talked about as one of the challenges that we have in solid waste services. We have a backlog of a lot of material in our yard waste facility that consists of 62 acres. It's been an impediment to our operation in the way of space. Also, we received a notice of violation from the state for those piles being out of compliance. So we've been working towards removing that pile and trying to streamline the operation in our yard waste center. I will say there is some good news to this. Based on the survey of the material that is in that pile, we've found out from our engineering services that 80% of it can be used still to some extent. I mean, it's been there for a very long time, so it's varying It's varying levels of degradation. We can use some of it for soil blending, compost, and some agricultural use. So we will be able to remove most of it in a sustainable manner, and I think that's a good thing. But we do estimate that cost to be around $4 million total, and that's partly why I will be requesting some additional support from the general fund. The last topic I'd like to touch before we talk about our budget drivers specifically is our curbside yard waste collection, although I know it's been a big topic as of late. We are exploring options to enhance yard debris collection by converting to the collection to yard waste to 95-gallon carts. If you recall, I spoke earlier in the year about our desire to do so. You could ask yourself, would the ability to collect yard waste automated with carts versus manually, would it help us during this crisis? And the answer is yes, a lot. But regardless of that, it's still the right thing to do for our employees' safety, to align how other municipalities are collecting yard waste, and to assist with the exploration of things like food waste collection curbside. So I will be coming to you again, and it'll be like Groundhog Day again, to talk a little bit about yard waste and yard waste collection in the fall. I'll have a plan by then to get this done. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the budget drivers simply because I know that you all are aware of some of the challenges that many of our departments are facing related to COVID-19, as well as some existing challenges. Oh, my timer is going off. Sorry about that. I didn't want to run too long, but I am. You know, our department's no different. We're facing similar challenges. I think for us, recycling certainly is a big one, as well as the yard waste center compliance, but the other ones I think we're all kind of facing as a city. What we are proposing in our FY21 budget is a $2 increase to our recycling fee. Currently, it's $2.60 per month, and that would go to $4.60. I mentioned the general fund support that we're asking for some additional revenue of $1.3 million, simply because part of that is going to be our challenge of getting into compliance with our yard waste center and preparing it for potentially going to a curbside collection change. And finally, we're making some small adjustments to our fees in the yard waste center simply to align with fair market values and be able to move some of our volume a lot quicker. And that is it. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, Councilor Branch, then Councilor Stewart.
Thank you, Stan, for the presentation. I know you're coming back later to talk about yard waste and the 95-gallon containers. As part of that presentation, can you see what data is out there on the contamination rate of yard waste once they go to containers? You know, I think sometimes, you know, the goal and the purpose of that brown container would be for yard waste, but people may throw other things within that container that shouldn't be there. So those that are currently using those containers, if we could find out what percentage of contamination they have, I think that information would be helpful for the council as well as helping us when we, I'm praying we go this route. So I'm going to say when we go this route, we can help in educating the community on the importance of putting recycles in recycles, trash in trash, and yard waste in yard waste containers. So that information will be helpful for me. And I understand the increase. We'll sleep on it. We have a couple of days to decide. But I thank you for your presentation and what you have presented.
Thank you, Councilman Branch. I'm sorry.
Oh, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I'd be happy to do the research on the contamination. I suspect it probably wouldn't be any more than contamination in recyclables, honestly. Plus, it'd be a lot easier to spot if it were in yard waste. But I'm happy to reach out to my colleagues and see what kind of challenges they have in that area.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Melton, then Councillor Knight, then Councillor Cox. So Councillor Stewart.
I just want to echo Councilman Branch's comment. I think that's a really insightful point that we need to make sure we're looking at. And then Mr. Joseph, I just want to say I'm really excited about the yard waste curbside option. I think this solves a lot of problems at once. And so I commend the innovation. And that's really it. So thank y'all.
Councillor Melton.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Councilmember Branch, Councilmember Stewart. I like the idea for the curbside yard waste. I think we all expected that this was coming down the pipeline with the issue with recycling, given, what happened with countries being able to receive it or wanting to receive it. And in looking at the graph you presented, I mean, the trend is just continuously going down. So I'm wondering what conversations we're having about maybe shifting to more sustainable options. I think that there's some synergy there or some overlap that could help. Like reuse is a good way to reduce what's being picked up from recycling. I know the city just started that refill program with the bottles and take them into businesses downtown. But I want to just, and this isn't really anything that needs to be answered now, just put out there that for a policy directive, I'd really like for us to start getting creative and thinking of ways that we can reduce the amount of recycling that we're having to export, which will reduce the cost. I met with a group that's, working through some community initiatives tied to Project Drawdown, which is ways to more sustainably think about how we're using materials. And so I just would challenge everyone to maybe start thinking in that direction as well, because it doesn't look like this issue with the cost of recycling is going to correct itself anytime soon.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Knight.
Yes, and just following up on Councillor Melton's conversation, as you know, Joseph, I'm very interested in the robustness of our recycling program and these cost issues that we're having to deal with. Were these estimates done before? I'm just looking here. I think there was a March 2020 date on here before really we got China was into the COVID issue, but I guess we really were just getting into it. And I wonder, is there any estimates going forward based on what's going on globally with this pandemic? And if that's going to, we obviously are using a lot more single use now than we were. And will that go back? And then to Councilor Melton's point about, ways to trend away from single use products because of the ongoing issue globally and locally with the cost of recycling and the numbers around that. So a bit rhetorical, but I think we need to be thinking about that long term. And I guess just if you have any thoughts or answers on what's the preview of looking forward post-COVID on the supply and demand.
Yeah, so I think the industry has been trying to figure out answers to that for about probably 5 to 6 years now, to say where's the bottom on this thing? Where are we going to end up landing on it? That curve has kind of flattened, and it's flattened in a bad spot. However, I do think the evolution of recycling is now bringing some other opportunities, like our mills. We're finding that we should have not been so reliant on overseas mills. So we're focusing more on our own mills, on our own processing. And you've got companies like Sunoco that not just processes the recyclables, but also makes the product at the same time, which makes them more sustainable and more resilient during times of recessions and those sort of things. So I think there's been a general move to build a platform that is a lot stronger around recycling, and I think, but not for this kind of crash in the industry in the global crisis, it probably wouldn't have happened. I think it was built on shaky grounds when pricing was really good.
Okay, Councillor Cox.
Yes, a couple questions. First, for the city manager, will we be briefed first on where we're going to have savings opportunities before we have to vote on an increase?
Are you talking about savings or opportunities within the solid waste fund?
The general fund, and in our capital fund, capital improvement project fund.
So the recommendations this week have to do with the various enterprise fund. You'll receive the presentation on the general fund and the general capital program on May 19th. And then you have from that point through the end of June in order to make your final decision. So our presentation on next Tuesday will focus on the general fund.
Okay, and that will happen before we have to make any decision about raising the recycling fee?
Yes, so I guess the way to look at it is we're going to tell you formally in the full document next Tuesday all of the changes, and it'll include what you're hearing today from the enterprise fund. So you don't take any actions today, you're just kind of getting briefed on the enterprise funds to help make the May 19th presentation a little bit shorter. Otherwise, it would just be so huge.
Okay. And then I noticed that glass accounts for a little more than a fifth of our recycling, and it looks like that's an expense. And are we planning on continuing to recycle glass, or will we at some point discontinue recycling glass?
Well, I think that decision is out there to be made depending on you all, essentially. I think it's an option. There's a lot of options here. I think we can go back to basics with recycling where you were just kind of having paper and metal and just the stuff that you can still sell. I think it would be a difficult transition for our residents to pull those things out. I'm not saying it's not possible. I think that the juice may not be worth the squeeze to do it simply because it's going to continue to end up there. And I think a lot of it is going to be dependent on the processors and what they're willing to pull out for one municipality versus another, simply because they all come through the same plant.
Okay. That's it for my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Melton.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I share similar concerns, but I think that was where my comments were sort of coming in. I think moving forward as a council, we need to be thinking about what policy shifts we can put into place to try to encourage our residents to be reducing the amount of glass that's ending up in our recycling anyway. And I think that there are some interesting ideas out there and then ways and programs that we can push some reuse. And so that's kind of a discussion that I hope we can take forward. I hope that this presentation highlights the fact that this problem is not going to go away, and we're going to have to get creative in a way to address it that doesn't mean increasing fees all the time to keep up with it.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Stan. Let's all give Stan a thumbs up.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you very much.
That's going to suck for the next person, though.
All right. Fifth on our agenda is the Stormwater Management Enterprise, and we have Wayne Miles coming up now from Engineering Services.
Great, Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you today to talk about our budget. My name is Wayne Miles. I'm the Stormwater Program Manager in the Engineering Services Department. What I'd like to review with you today, first, is give an overview of what we do, some of the challenges we face, give a summary of our proposed fiscal year 21 budget, and then talk about our path forward. First, our core mission is to manage stormwater to preserve and protect life, support healthy natural resources, and complement sustainable growth for the community. We are guided and advised by the 10-member Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, who are all appointed by you, members of the City Council. And they're a good perspective from a variety of aspects of the community, and they're in a very engaged group. And I know they're looking forward to getting back together and meeting again very soon. We have a number of services and programs that support that core mission. We are regulated under the Federal Clean Water Act, have an NPDES non-discharge permit, but we do go above and beyond in many areas of level of service related to our programs that we provide to the community. Some of the challenges that we faced, we do have a lot of aging infrastructure and rehabilitation, much like the Water and Sewer Department has. Something in addition, though, urbanization puts a lot of stress on our natural creek corridors, and sedimentation erosion of those banks is a big issue that we continue to face. As changes and we have storms that are more frequent, more intense, higher severity, we do have flooding that occurs occasionally in some key areas, and we work hard to mitigate the impacts of that and protect our citizens through flood warning systems. And we also are working hard to enhance sustainable development using green stormwater infrastructure. We're advocating for these types of stormwater control devices that more closely mimic nature and how stormwater is handled, promoting infiltration into the soil rather than stormwater running off into the storm drains and into the creeks. Here's our proposed budget for FY21. I would like to say, first of all, that we did work with the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission to prepare several level of service options to propose with corresponding rate increases that range from a 50-cent rate increase to a $3 rate increase. However, given the uncertain economic conditions from the pandemic and the impacts it's having on our community, we have decided to withdraw that recommendation and at this point recommend no rate increase for the FY21 budget. I will say the revenue projections that are in our budget right now have not been adjusted downward for potential COVID-19 revenue impacts, should we see them, but we have frozen 11 of our 120 positions that we currently have, and we believe that doing this will give us the flexibility to react to revenue reductions even in a significant manner if we do see those, and then we'll have the flexibility moving forward to adjust as those impacts are better known. Here's a bar graph of our proposed budget for this year as compared to past years. One item, if you look on the far right, you will notice our budget is less this year. It's a total of $24 million, which is a little lower than past years. The primary reason for that is in past years we have had the opportunity to appropriate fund balance from one year to the next while still meeting our fiscal policy criteria. We are not able to do that this year. In fact, we are proposing to put another $900,000 back into the fund balance to replenish it. So that's the reason for that reduction. We, in the green or the lower portion of this bar, you will note that we are projecting operating costs to go up by about $1.2 million related to a number of factors, billing, labor, health care, materials, and other overhead manners. And those two items are putting a squeeze on our capital improvements budget. So the top bar, the $4.5 million you can see, is quite a bit lower than we have seen in previous years. And that's a result of those factors that the operating costs are going up and we don't have that fund balance appropriation. We will, however, have the opportunity to continue to spend capital funds that have been unspent from past years. And we are making very good progress. As you can see in this chart going back to FY16, we had accumulated unspent capital funds of a considerable amount, but we have been spending those down. So in addition each year to the capital expenditure that had been funded for each year, we were in addition spending down this unspent funds and continue to do so. So here, going into next year, our target is to get down below $10 million. So that gives us about a $6 million additional capital improvement fund to spend in addition to the 4.5 we're proposing for this year. So we do expect for fiscal year 21 to be able to continue a modest capital improvement program moving forward until next year. Looking at our rates compared to our peers, in North Carolina, our rate is it's $5 per single-family equivalent unit per month, and that is based on an impervious surface based fee. So commercial rates with higher impervious areas are billed proportionately. So, for example, if there was a commercial property that had 10 times as much impervious area as a single-family property on average, they would pay 10 times that fee and would therefore pay $50 per month. We are in the middle of the pack in terms of our peers in North Carolina. You will notice, however, there are other southeast state capitals on this graph, and we are at the low end compared to our peers of capital cities in the southeast. So summing up, overall, we propose no rate increase this year. We do appreciate the continued support the City Council has provided us and continues to provide us, and we will use the available budget to the utmost to provide the level of service as much as possible to meet the needs of our community and to protect public health and the environment. At this point, I would be glad to take any questions that you have.
Right, if we could, yeah, great, thank you. Councilor Buffkin?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that presentation. I am of two minds about our situation here. There's no doubt that the need for stormwater facilities and replacement and repair is great in our city. A couple pictures you displayed look like every backyard in North Raleigh that I've been in, trying to find help for folks who are losing their yard, folks who are experiencing flooding in their basements and threaten the integrity of the foundations of their homes. This is a really big, serious problem that impacts people's lives. But I think also the recommendation of no fee increase is consistent with what the community is experiencing right now in this difficult time. So it's a tough call to make. I think all the comparison of rates shows that our stormwater fees need to be raised. And I think the best approach is a slow and gradual raise. I hope that our economy will be in a position where we can start that slow, gradual raise next year. But I do appreciate your recognition of the pain and difficulty that our community is going through right now. I'm glad to see no increase this year, although the need still remains. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any additional questions? Councilor Stewart, then Councilor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Miles, thank you so much for this presentation. I'd be curious, can you remind me what the recommended rate increases that y'all were considering were, what amounts they were?
Yeah, so our current rate is $5. The ranges that were proposed for the various levels of service ranged from a 50-cent increase up to a $3 increase for all the program area expansions that were being considered.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Buffkin, I totally appreciate your comments and thoughts about where folks are right now. I think we also need to keep in mind how real climate change is and the impacts to our community. It's something we've been talking about a lot as a council, but also as a community. And with scientists continuing to predict larger rainstorms, more impactful rainstorms, more hurricanes, I don't think now is the moment to necessarily sit on our hind and wait. So I'd really urge us to think about going ahead and doing a rate increase this year. even if it's on the minimal side of things. So I just kind of want to put that out there and to think about in the next week or two.
Counselor Knight? You're muted, Counselor.
Wouldn't you rather me be muted when I speak? So thank you, Wayne, for that presentation. I agree. So I appreciate what both counselors have said. So I'm sort of torn as well. Just to make sure we're looking at this apples to apples, and there's oranges to oranges. How about what has been our rate increase? I don't think I see a graph on here about the last, say, 5 years of rate increases or what our rates were. Is that on here somewhere on your presentation, or could you tell us what the rate increases have been, if there have been rate increases the last 5 years?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes. It's easy to summarize. We've had a stormwater utility fee since 2004 for the city. There has been only one rate increase over that period of time, and that was a rate increase from $4 to $5 in FY17.
Thank you. So obviously when you put up comparisons, they're going to draw comparisons and contrast, right? So we're obviously much lower than many similar sized cities in terms of our rate. And the fact we have not had other than one rate increase when we've had rate increases in the other enterprise systems pretty consistently. So I am interested as well, because I do see the comparison in services directly to what Councilor Stewart was saying about the issues, problems that we're having, flooding, et cetera. So I'm going to think about this as well and listen to the rest of the councilors about if there is a need. And I appreciate y'all coming forward without a recommendation for a fee and rate increase. But and then to that point, comparing to other cities, you said the commercial properties are paying on the same proportion as residential. Generally, they have larger pieces of or larger impervious surfaces on their properties, so they're larger fees. Do other cities, similar sized cities, do it the same way for commercial versus residential properties?
Yes, sir, they do. That's a fairly standard approach to how stormwater bills are paid. It is based on that impervious surface fee. That's the most common way to do it across the country. And just so for perspective, for our system, that approach results in about 2/3 of our stormwater revenues coming from commercial properties, because that's where most of the impervious surface lies within the city of Raleigh.
But yeah, so it is equal or equitable, I guess, in that regard. But they are not paying higher rates than residential properties, correct?
Correct. It's still in proportion to the amount of impervious area. So our residential unit is 2,260 square feet of impervious area. So we simply measure the impervious area on commercial properties, divide it by that factor, and that gives us the number of single-family equivalent units that they are billed per month, and that's the multiple of $5.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, sir.
Councilor Cox?
Yes, quick question. Do we collect any kind of stormwater or impervious surface fees from new development?
There is not a fee per se for impervious surface until they are actually starting to be billed a water and sewer bill. But there are some development fees that we charge that cover our plan review portions, our soil and erosion control portions, but those are modest and do not pay for the entire costs of running those programs. It's a relatively small, out of our $24 million, less than $1 million are those types of development fees that we collect for permits and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you for the. I'll be quick, and I just want to echo my support of Councilor and Councilor Stewart. I think that we.
I lost him.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
I thought it was just me, but no.
Mayor, until he comes back, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it possible that in maybe the manager's update or something, you can send us what those, the proposals that you pull back, what they look like? So we can at least have an idea of what you might have proposed? I'm sorry, city manager?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. If I could just help on the process on that. Let's refine this a little bit. This is probably one of the casualties of the COVID-19 related process. So we were interested in talking about this back in March, and then that could have brought the options and landed in a place better where we kind of knew where we were going to go. So what we can certainly do is, what I would suggest, Mr. Branch, if the council's interested in this, go ahead and ask us for a budget note, and we will prepare the materials with options and then intentionally bring that back to you at your next June, at that first June meeting when you come back on the work session. And the staff could even present that in greater detail if you like. And then we'll send you some information too, but you might as well do that in the budget note process would be my recommendation. And if you want the staff to do a presentation, we can at that budget work session.
So requested.
I would interpret that as requested without objection.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution to have that come forward as a budget note, so we can understand from a collective standpoint what this all looks like. So, good suggestion. Okay. We lost there's Councilor Martin. What we just asked Councilor Martin is for this to come back as a budget note, and we'll get a review at our budget work session on the 19th or the 2nd.
I would say you would do that at your, I believe it's June 1st budget work session after the record.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, so June 1st budget work session on that Monday. Okay. And Councilor Martin, I didn't want to rob you of your time. Is there anything you would like to add?
I'm just gonna turn off my mic so I don't disappear again.
Okay, thank you, Wayne.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right, next we have other enterprise funds update. Thank you, Mary.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. Thank you again for taking the time today to walk through the enterprise funds. In order to save a little bit of time today, I'm actually going to walk through three other funds rather than go through elaborate presentations, just to give you some highlights that will be included in our recommended budget. I want to first begin with the City of Raleigh's parking division, which continues to remain committed to delivering high-quality services through innovative solutions, enhancing the customer's parking experience. As a reminder, our parking system includes 8,000 structured spaces, 678 service lot spaces, 1,550 meter spaces, and ownership of 60% of public parking spaces in the downtown. To enhance the parking experience, Parking has rebranded from ParkLink to Raleigh Parking, launched a new parking management software, implemented additional wayfinding and signage, piloted emerging technology, and continued to build successful partnerships with community organizations. As part of the fiscal year 20 budget process, staff presented City Council with a two-phase approach to implement market-driven parking rates intended to align with benchmarked peers and shift parkers towards off-street locations by reducing the incentive to park on-street all day. Parking initiated a robust community outreach effort, including engagement with DRA and the Hillsborough Street Corporation. City Council adopted Phase 1 as part of the fiscal year 20 budget process. As part of the 21 budget, staff will defer Phase 2 recommendations until the fiscal year 22 budget process so that staff can continue to gather additional data on the impact of Phase 1, complete additional public outreach opportunities, and align off-street fee changes with new alternatives. The only fiscal year 21 fee change is the valet permit fee, which is shifting to an annual fee rather than a one-time cost, and that will be included in the proposed fee schedule, which will be presented with the budget next week. The Raleigh Convention Center and Performing Arts Complex includes the Convention Center, Red Hat Amphitheater, the Duke Energy Center for the Performing Arts, and the Coastal Credit Union Music Park. For fiscal year 21, staff is estimating that event-related revenue will be down 25%, as well as the associated expenses. This chart shows RCC's working budget pre-COVID compared to their current proposed budget for fiscal year 21. City and county staff are working on the 22nd Amendment to the interlocal agreement, and we are looking at the hospitality tax operating contribution flat. In order to balance, staff is recommending the use of fund balance in order to cover the remaining gap. As part of the fiscal year 21 budget, staff is recommending rate increases at the Convention Center. Equipment and services are adjusted annually through the budget process to ensure cost recovery, but room rental rates have not been increased since the facility opened in 2008. Staff is recommending a phased approach to rate increases with 25% in fiscal year 21 and additional 25% in fiscal year 22. The chart on the slide shows those proposed rates, which are maximum rates that we would charge. Staff is also proposing increases at the Duke Energy Center for the Performing Arts. Nope, there we go. Theater rental rates there have not been increased since 1998. Beginning in fiscal year 21, rental rates for all performance halls at the PAC will see an increase for national touring companies. Residents and local companies will not be impacted by these changes. Current rental rates range from $400 to $3,300. The proposed increases will be from $400 to $6,000 on the theater. In addition, equipment and services will move to cost recovery. To minimize the impact on our local and resident companies, staff proposes a 10% step increase in those equipment and service charges, which is well below our cost recovery. Moving on, Go Raleigh continues to provide critical transportation options for members of our community. In response to COVID-19, Transit is working to install plexiglass guards for drivers and working to fully implement contactless pay options. As routes are continuing, we are looking at continued expansion in our current fiscal year 21 for Route 21, Carolee and Glenwood Avenue, and Transit is not proposing any new positions with the fiscal year 21 budget. As Transit looks to the budget, we have seen a decrease in fare box revenue due to the shelter-in-place orders and suspended fares. For fixed routes, we are projecting a 60% fiscal year 20 fare box revenue decline, while for ADA access, we are projecting 70% of the revenue. Fare box revenue makes up approximately 10% of Transit's total revenues. The general fund will continue to support Transit with $20.6 million in funding, which is approximately 43% of their funding. The Wake Transit Plan represents a critical partnership with our regional partners to fund investments in transit. The plan is primarily funded through a half-cent sales tax collected through Wake County. TPAC, the Transit Planning Advisory Committee, is projecting a reduction in sales tax revenues. The current draft of the Wake Transit Plan focuses on prioritizing existing needs while evaluating those revenue sources. This will not impact continued bus rapid transit funding, including local and federal grant funding for planning efforts. Staff are reviewing the CARES Act to determine how to offset projects delayed through the Wake Transit Plan. The city has received a $25.3 million allocation. Once this plan is finalized, we will look to allocate CARES Act funding for capital projects. Staff are also looking to utilize CARES Act funding in fiscal year 20 to offset the loss of revenues and cover expenses to increase the safety of our drivers, riders, and bus fleet. Staff is here to answer any questions on any of these enterprise funds.
Councillor Branch?
Question around the transit, as far as the plexiglass that's going to be added. Will that be a permanent, will it remain after COVID-19 has been more, I'm going to say, manageable overall?
Yes, so David Eatman with Department of Transportation. The answer is that yes, this is a permanent installation. The particular barriers that we'll be installing are actually security barriers, so they'll have a dual purpose. There'll be a security barrier as well as they will provide that opportunity for some protection from the general public once we get to that stage where we start using a front door entry again. So yes, these will be permanent, and we will actually get these on all new buses as well.
Okay, and my last question is, I believe our current contract with our vendor ends December of 21. Do we know when that process will start moving forward with the new contract application process?
Yes, so certainly it takes us about 6 to 8 months to go through that process. So under that time frame, we would be looking to kick that off right around the beginning of the fiscal year.
All right. Thank you.
Councillor Cox?
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to say I think it's great that we have launched a program to add 17 ADA spaces downtown. I was wondering if we could consider having the Mayor's Commission on Persons with Disabilities take a look at that program and evaluate it and see if how well it's working and whether or not the 17 spaces are sufficient for going forward. And it's just a question, I guess, to the manager whether or not we could have an evaluation such as that. And I guess
let me refer that back to a transportation staff, I believe that's in the chamber, Mary. I believe they were a part of that 17 space discussion, but I will verify that. So I don't know if Mr. Moore or Mr. Callum or someone is available to help answer that question. There he is.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Moore, Director of Transportation. We do have engaged the Mayor's Committee on Disabilities in that discussion about where we have places. We're doing continual evaluation on those, looking at utilization and looking at where we can find additional spots in and around downtown and in some of our other business centers. So very interested in making sure that we expand that program and take it out to the rest of our communities where we can.
Has the commission had an opportunity to formally review the program now?
We do that on a regular basis, Mr. Cox. We take that to them periodically. We have a staff member who tries to attend their meetings at least every other month. So we take that forward, and that's something we can revisit with them to make sure that we're doing and addressing all those needs to the best we can.
Yeah, that would be great, because I'd be interested in hearing from them to see what they think about it.
Certainly, we can take care of that for you.
Thank you.
Michael, it's Michael, I just wanted to thank you for getting that project kicked off. I was no longer on council, but it was something that I had worked on, and it just kind of fell to the wayside. You came in and jump-started it, and really grateful for that, as are a lot of our residents who need this type of service. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to do that. We like to make sure that we've got an inclusive city that's inclusive for everybody, and trying to make sure that we can accommodate. You know, everybody wants to come downtown and be part of downtown, and everyone's got $1 to spend, and if we'd like to make that available to everyone. So,
thank you, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. And Michael, while you're there, this might be a question for you, and perhaps from budget. Around the potential use of Federal CARES Act funding and transportation needs. With the upcoming review of the budget note that I requested around paratransit going fee-free in 2021, I'm curious if, as part of that conversation, we might review using the CARES Act funding if it's possible for us to use some of the CARES Act funding to relieve the added cost constraint for folks that use paratransit in Raleigh. It is an assumption, but after talking to a number of folks that do use paratransit, know that a lot of those individuals are not only cost burdened before COVID, but a number of those folks have found themselves unemployed. And now they're more cost burdened than they were before, and find themselves struggling to continue to pay for the tickets. And so we'd just like for us to think about how we might prioritize that community as well as we move forward into the 2021 budget and utilize the Federal CARES Act funding that we have.
Councilmember Martin, I'm going to defer to Dave Eatman with Transit to talk about that. I do know that we've prepped a budget note for you to come back on that can quantify some of those costs, but I'll defer to him and he's a little closer to the CARES Act and has a much better working knowledge of it than I do.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So today, as it relates to the CARES Act, we haven't built that package of services yet. So we're not exactly sure how we're going to utilize the funds. We are happy to announce that the funds do come with flexibility. So I think there are certainly opportunities there. As stated earlier, we will be coming back to council with that package of how those CARES Acts will be utilized. And certainly I think that that's going to be the point where we have to make those trade-offs of what gets funded. We know that there's some operating needs at many levels for this year and probably for next fiscal year. And so, again, those discussions will be coming.
Okay, great. That's helpful, and I'll look forward to that discussion when we have more information. But thank you for fielding all of this and continuing to work around the clock. I know that
we will be back.
But yeah, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. Councilor Stewart.
I wanted to bring up the question around the convention center fund increases, the fee increases there. I understand the need, and it also strikes me as a really odd time to be increasing those rental fees, as we're unsure how people are going to be using those spaces moving forward and when they're going to start using those spaces moving forward. And so does it end up being counteractive, or do we see it as such a small increase that we're not really concerned?
I'm going to ask Carrie Painter to come forward to help answer this question.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Hi, Carrie.
I think I heard the question. Were you asking me, is this a proactive? Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah. So I have some concerns about increasing fees at a time when folks are not going to large event spaces. And so as we're uncertain about that future, are we hurting ourselves by increasing that cost, which I just don't know what it would do, right? As folks aren't ready to go and do big events, are we discouraging folks from doing that moving
Right.
forward? So just
so
thought
at
process
this
behind
point, sorry, got it. So at this point, we are booking way into the future. So we have spent the last weeks booking 2024, 2025, 23. So if we at some point don't implement this increase is already 3 years from now. It's going to happen that far away. Everybody who is in this year is already booked in this year, and everyone who we have postponed or rebooked, we have maintained their rates, their prices, so nothing goes up for anyone in the near future. So it's pretty important that we get that moving, because in the future we're still way behind our competitors.
So
that's great. Yeah, thank you for explaining that.
So Carrie, what you're really
it's important
saying,
not to affect people now.
Carrie, so what you're really saying is that this rate increase will go into effect going forward, not this year.
Correct. Because we're not going to start booking these contracts until this goes in July. So, I guess conceivably someone could book the center in this year for the year. But at this point, it's full. It's pretty packed, unless people continue to cancel. And then we certainly would work to make that work no matter what, because we want to get them back in the center when we're legally able.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Thank you.
I think that's it, Carrie. Thank you. All right, now we have other items, and Mary's back up.
This is an item that we have typically put at the end of a budget work session, and it just has some informational items for City Council, so I'm not going to go through them, but if you recall, we did do a budget resident survey that we do every year, and so it has the memo in there that outlines the results of that. Just as a reminder, we have completed the RFP for our MSDs, so they will be recommended as part of our budget process, and that memo in there speaks to that. By law, we're required to hold a public hearing on that, and so that will be June 2nd. And so at your next meeting, you'll be calling the public hearing for the MSD selection. And then the last is our budget note request, and so at this meeting, we like to remind you of all the current requests that we have from City Council for budget notes. We know there'll be more coming, and we just had to we'll add the one that came tonight. But these are the ones that we've received throughout the year. And so we'll be providing that information as a reminder prior to your June 1st work session. That's your first budget work session, and so these will go out with the agenda for that meeting for discussion on June 1st. So I can answer any questions if you have anything about the process or where we're at.
Does anyone have any additional questions? Mary, when was the budget survey done?
So it was done pre-COVID, so the results are that, and you'll see it when you read it in terms of the responses of the residents. So we opened it at the end of February, so it ran through March. So it kind of was on both sides of it, and it closed the beginning of April. So while we did use it in kind of as we prepared the budget, we probably did not utilize it as much as we may have in previous years, right? So if you recall, over the last month, we've had to relook at the budget. And so we did try to understand what our residents desire, but we've also had to change course midstream this year. So.
Yep. Okay, does anybody have any additional questions? All right, well, that was the last item on our agenda. City Manager, do you have anything else? Okay, well, call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Let's give the staff a thumbs up. Thank you.